Oui, allô, Pizza Galassi, j'ai pas le temps, faut faire sur Internet.
Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à la 23e édition du Festival international du film fantastique.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session of the Neuchâtel International Fantastic Film Festival. We're going to terminate this afternoon's session by listening to Simon Weisse, who is a miniature effects supervisor. Now, at the moment, a lot of emphasis is placed on digital creation. A lot of special effects are, to a large extent, digital, but they depend often on the involvement of tangible objects. Simon Weisse bases his work on concrete objects. And he's going to Wes Anderson has been cooperating with Simon Weisse for quite some time. And Wes Anderson would have difficulty making his films without the great work of Simon Weisse and his miniature models. We would like to thank Simon for having accepted our invitation to be with us today. We'd now like to give him the floor, and please give him a round of applause. First of all, I would like to thank the festival for welcoming me here. It's always interesting to present our work, which is rather special. I always call it a niche activity in cinema, in film. But I don't just do miniatures for cinema, and have done for some years, but I also craft props. By way of an introduction, I'm going to show you a montage of the choice of films that I've been working on for quite a few years now. Now, even though quite a lot of films were presented there, in the introduction I've decided to present you with some examples of our work, in particular miniatures for the visual effects, for the recent films of Wes Anderson. As I was saying, we work in a niche because all these things could be done digitally, but someone like Wes is always pushing to go as far as possible in the direction of practical effects in his films.
A number of years ago, while suffering from a mild case of scribe's fever, a form of neurasthenia common among the intelligentsia of that time, I decided to spend the month of August in the spa town of Nebelsbad below the Alpine Sudetenwalds, and had taken up rooms in the Grand Budapest, a picturesque, elaborate, and once widely celebrated establishment. I expect some of you will know it.
In this film, Grand Budapest Hotel, there were several things. We were looking for different places to shoot this film in, and in the interior of this hotel, they found a large store which was, to us from Berlin, they had found a large store which was abandoned, and they recreated the whole interior of the hotel. They said they would look for different locations in the Czech Republic and Germany and elsewhere to recreate the interior. But they said, oh no, it's too complicated. We have to find another way of doing it. We're going to use models. Now, what we saw in the introduction was this mountain with an elevator. This was the first model we did. Here you get an idea of the dimensions of the model itself. And we did all this in cooperation with the people who had worked on the digital side of the film. Now, what I like about this image is that the background was painted by a painter who did a fresco which was 10 meters long and 3 meters high. That could also have been done digitally, but this was a choice which was taken by the production and the film director to shoot it in this way. And when we were shooting the model, we said it would be nice to have two characters, two figures at the top of this bridge who are about to go down in the elevator. And these two people are my best friend and myself on the bridge. Then there were other pieces which were crafted just for this passage and for the landscape and for the discovery of the hotel. In particular, this funicular, we did not really know how to film it. We simply inclined the camera at 45 degrees, knowing that someone like Wes Anderson is always using a celluloid film, which is good for the image, but for us that's an additional technical constraint, because we always say to ourselves it would be easier to do that with a digital camera, but that's the way it is. Now, there is a hotel which is virtually similar, virtually identical. The model of our model is at Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic, but for various reasons, they did not want us to shoot, or they did not want to shoot there. They said the weather won't be very good, and then the hotel would have had to close for several days. So we took that as an inspiration to make our model. There's someone called Kaspre who did this drawing of the hotel, and this is all we had. We did not have any technical plan. We had only this drawing, because at that stage I said to myself, I myself don't like constructional plans. I have my model makers and colleagues who love to create and improvise, and they're good at their jobs. This is the result we achieved. After 3 months of construction work, knowing that with Wes Anderson it's always rather complicated, because initially there's the drawing, but as we construct it, something else comes along, something else crops up. And he always changes his mind just 5 minutes before we start shooting. So this gives you an idea of the size of the hotel, because when you're talking about miniature decors, I don't like talking about models and modeling, because often people think I'm in my cellar playing with my model railway. So we try to build our miniature decors, our miniature sets, as large as possible, because it makes them more credible, makes it more credible for the viewer's eye and for the camera. If you build them too small, it no longer works. I always enjoy showing people these two shots on the left. They had built the entrance to the hotel at Görlitz in a 1:1 scale, real-life size, and on the right it's our model. I had received these images from Görlitz at one point, and I said to myself, this cannot be possible. It's not, doesn't correspond at all to what we have done. So I was horrified. I didn't sleep all night. But then Wes said, it doesn't matter. If the spectator in the cinema realizes this, then he will not have seen the film, or will not have enjoyed the film. So we left it like this, and it went down very smoothly in the film, and no one criticized anything. Then Wes rarely comes to see what we do in our work. We always have exchanges with him by email, but then he did come along to see what the hotel had become in the end. I could show you many more details about the Grand Budapest Hotel film, but I would now like to move on to Asteroid City, which is a totally different project. There, for that, we were asked to build several things, and they were not just miniatures. They were also rather special props, pretty large props and gadgets as well. And then there was the introductory scene to the film, which starts with a train. Well, I myself don't like trains all that much, but we'll have to make do with them. We'll have to put up with it. I imagined ourselves shooting with miniature trains, and the largest size we have in Europe is coaches and locomotives on a 1/22, 1:22 scale. But the production said to me, everything is bigger in America, and we will find you much bigger trains. and the scale will end up being a 1/8 scale. Now, what you have here is a storyboard, but what Wes does is animated storyboards. So you see the whole film that he's going to make in cartoon form. That's how he calls it. And it's very interesting for us because it shows us exactly what we have to do. So we look at the animated storyboard. Let's look at the animated storyboard and then look at the film.
Le résultat après dans le film.
So this now is the result afterwards in the film.
Alors voilà.
So there we are.
Alors le fameux train, il était dans notre petit atelier à Berlin.
The famous train was in our little workshop in Berlin. We received all of this in spare parts, in individual parts from the United States. There are people over there who build these types of trains in 1/8 scale. They play with them with their kids in the garden. They have a lot of space over there. And I was told you will receive typically 1950s American train, but we received it all in individual parts, not assembled. I thought we would receive instructions as you do from IKEA, but no, we just received it in individual pieces, so it was quite difficult to assemble them in order to make a locomotive, just the front part of the locomotive. In my workshop, I've organized part of my workshop as a boy would and a part as a girl would. It's well organized. My co-workers were very excited when the train was about to arrive. My male co-workers were very excited, but I decided to give the assembly task to the girls. because the girls were much better organized and more creative for that type of task, assembling this locomotive. For the boys, for the guys, it would have just been a game. The girls started working on it, and I really think I took the right decision. This film was shot on an enormous site just outside Madrid, where Orson Welles had made some films. That's why Wes Anderson had chosen that site. They built an enormous decor, about 1.5 kilometers long and 500 meters wide. And they told us, once we finished shooting with the actors and the big decor, we will remove everything and install your train. But it was pretty complicated because the mountains that were in the background worked more or less, fitted more or less well with the scale of our train. That's why we redo the sculptures in the mountain in polystyrene so that the scale matches. So this is what it looked like during shooting in this kind of semi-artificial desert in Spain. Normally it's a site where there are olive trees, or where there were olive trees, because they had chopped them all down. The ecologists were not very happy, but people are prepared to do anything for Wes Anderson, and they'd put a lot of red soil on the ground to construct this set, this decor. We had to do everything from A to Z, because at this scale you don't find anything. The cars were sculpted, the avocados were done piece by piece, and there was quite a special view from the top, from the sky. In Berlin, we created another scale, 1/45th, where there was just a camera that went over it. The big problem for us was always that all this is always shot with film, and you need an incredible team to be able to shoot this on our models. Now, to show you how this works, we'll show you an excerpt from one film, which you can also find on YouTube as well. This gives you an idea of the amount of work that we put in and the shooting. We are. Another model that we did for this film was a model of a spacecraft They're designed by Victor Gorguet, with whom we sometimes work. I was not expecting something from the 1950s. I was expecting something round, something rounded. I was expecting to find something from the 1950s or 60s, a rounded one. But here the design was completely different. And it was made of kitchen utensils. You can find chip packets, sugar bags, and things like that. Lots of things. Well, we included them all in the. You don't see those items in the model. You just see kitchen utensils. So it was quite a lot of fun for us. So these are the images of this space vessel, spacecraft. But we had quite a few problems as well, because they wanted us to shoot this in green, and but there were lots of reflections. I said with green there would be too many reflections, so we removed the green to overcome that problem. Then another thing we did with this film was the famous meteorites, or rather asteroids, as they call them, to make it clear that we don't just do miniatures, but also special props. These meteorites were, well, more or less the size of a watermelon. And there was something else. We had to recreate parts of this decor for the animation film of these famous extraterrestrials. It was Kim Kokelev from stop motion. It's stop motion at 24 images per second. In most cases, the speed is 12 images per second. She was capable of going much faster than that, so as to ensure a degree of fluidity in the film. And we'll take a look at the result now. There's no sound, but it's the images that are important.
Voilà, donc pour cet extrait,
For this excerpt,
ça montre bien que, bon,
just like to say that it shows that on the one hand you have your miniature work on the miniatures, and then what was shot on a real life-sized decor. And most of the time we make everything in Berlin, and then we go to a studio called AMS in London. Director of photography is called Tristan Oliver, and he worked on the shooting of these sequences because there are not many chief operators who really know how to handle the shooting of miniatures, knowing that afterwards it's going to go into post-production with all the visual effects. So it's a whole mix of knowledge and know-how between these different sections of film, of cinema. And often there are people who come and say to me, we could have done all of this digitally, which is true. But I think it's the combination of all these different ways of producing, filming, that makes this artistically slightly different from what it would be if it was purely digital. But that's just my view.
So, one of the last chapters I want to address is the shorts that Wes Anderson makes according to the stories of Roald Dahl, and I am quite happy because this short film got an Oscar, and I'm quite happy about it because we spent a lot of time and love for these films. There was one scene in particular where the character leaves a casino and walks in a street. It's the world of Wes Anderson, which is a little bit complicated. But this particular street that you see here is in a forced perspective, which means that the building in the background is not at all at the same scale as the buildings on the right side and the left-hand side. For once, we were able to shoot in digital because they shot the whole film with a 16mm camera, and I said, no, this is going to be too complicated. So he accepted that we do this with a stop-motion technique. This was one of the first tests that we shot. And I always show the result afterwards.
This sort of thing had happened to him 3 years ago before he started the yoga business. He'd have gone crazy with excitement. He'd been rushing off to the nearest nightclub to celebrate. But Henry didn't feel excited. He felt sad. Every time he made a bet, he'd been certain to win. There was no thrill, no suspense, no danger. Of course, from now on, he knew that he could travel all around the world making millions, but was it going to be any fun? Another thing, was it not entirely possible the process he'd gone through to acquire yoga powers had completely and utterly changed his entire outlook on life?
So we'll see Benedict Cumberbatch in another scene where he drives a Ferrari, but this Ferrari does not move. It was shot in front of a green screen, and I was told that they wanted it to take place in an English landscape and the fall, and they want to have a model that should be 50 meters long. And I said, okay, we can do this, but how are we going to shoot it? How are we going to find a studio in Berlin that is 50 meters long and with the lighting, how we're going to do this. But they said, no, we do not want to shoot this in a studio. We want to shoot this in a natural light outside. We were mid-November in Berlin, and I said, well, this is impossible. It's too cold. The sun rises at 9 and sets at 4. But one night, I said, yes, lately we visited a greenhouse next to Berlin, which was halfway abandoned, and which was in daylight. And I suggested that we'd shoot in this greenhouse, which was exactly 50 meters long. So we set this road up with a bridge, etc. I can't remember the exact scale. It's between 1/15th and 1/25th. So we assembled this in this greenhouse, and it was freezing. Here I show you part of this shooting.
Voilà, et ainsi de suite.
Etc. So this is how it looks like in the film.
He felt as if his entire body had become encased snug and cozy within that little black area of burning nothingness. Admittedly, this lasted only 15 seconds, but from that moment on, no matter where he was or what he was doing, he made a point of practicing with the candle 5 times a day.
Voilà. Alors, il y avait...
Here we are. There were 3 other short films in the series of short films for Netflix, but there was another one on which we worked as well, and this will be the last part of the presentation. I would like to show you this film because it's a little bit special. We have the point of view here from the actor while he's attached to railroad tracks, and we see only his shoes, and at one point he sees a plane above him. So this decor that's on the right is still part of the storyboard, and we had a little bit more detailed drawing on the left-hand side. He wanted it to be a model, but in a very forced perspective. So this is what we built. It is very small in the end. But the railroad tracks, which are huge at the beginning, 2 meters long, get much smaller up to, and then they reach 2 centimeters. This model ended up in the miniature cinema in Lyon. We integrated the Wes space, and it's funny because Wes is taking a photo of us during the inauguration. Well, usually it's the opposite that happens, but it is very nice of him that he came. We get along very well, and I always say that without him, we wouldn't be much in what we are doing, and he says that without people like us, he wouldn't be anything either. He has his photo operator, his production designer, Adam Stockhouse, and other people with whom he's been working for numerous years. And it is really quite something to be part of this little family. Here, it's also for the Swan. We did this in December in Berlin. He also wanted to shoot this outside, but we said, no, we are going to shoot this inside in my workshop, and we're not going to tell him. and afterwards nobody saw any difference. So I'll show you what it looks like in the film.
He watched it until it disappeared. Then, quite suddenly, he heard a curious little vibrating sound coming from the rails on either side of him. It was very soft, scarcely audible, a tiny thrumming whisper that seemed to be coming along the rails from far away. Peter Watson raised his head and looked down the long, straight railway line that stretched away for a mile into the distance and saw the train.
Voilà, donc ça résume
So
un peu.
this
Je pourrais montrer beaucoup
sums up
plus de
a
choses,
little
mais
bit
peut-être que ça vous
what
donne une petite idée de ce que nous on fait toujours.
what we do.
On est
I could show you much more, but
d'ailleurs, j'ai un peu de mal à trouver
there are not that many of us who do that kind of work, and it's a little bit difficult for me to find young people who still want to
et
work like
je dis aussi
this.
parce qu'il y a des puristes qui disent on ne veut
Because
que
there are
des
some
miniatures
purists who say we only want
que des effets numériques.
old-style miniature. Some other people say we only want computer-generated imagery. I personally am open to nearly everything, and I think that mixing old and new techniques is actually a
Donc,
source
je
of
finis, en remerciant encore une fois le
richness
festival
involved.
d'avoir
I would like to
accepté de montrer
thank
ça
the
ici.
festival once again for accepting to show this here. I always thank my team, which is a wonderful team. I have about 10, 12 people who always work with me. And I would like to thank Wes Anderson personally. I would like to thank his production and the other production as well for being able to show this. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Alors, si vous avez des questions,
If you have
allez-y.
any questions, please do ask them. I'm here to answer.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Une question plutôt technique. Combien de temps ça
I have a
prend pour faire
technical
un projet
question.
comme Budapest Hotel?
How long does it take to complete a project like Budapest Hotel?
Pour nous ou le film en entier?
Tout ce qui
Just
était
our part of the work or the whole film? Well, just the part relating to
Il y a
the
toujours
model.
le temps
Answer.
de construction qui est très
Well, the
long.
construction time is very long.
Sur Budapest Hotel, on a passé, je
On
crois,
Budapest
on
Hotel,
avait une préparation de genre 1 ou 2 mois où
the preparation time was 1 or 2 months.
un peu les
We had to see what drawings
techniques,
had to be
comment on
done,
va construire ça.
and we had to think about the technical aspects. How are we going to construct this? I think
3 et
the
4 mois.
construction of all the different models took about
Sachant que,
3 to 4 months.
c'est toujours très long
Knowing that,
et
well, it's always pretty lengthy,
revient
and the
cher parce qu'il y a
miniature
beaucoup d'œuvres.
sets, the miniature decors cost quite a lot because there's a lot of labor involved. We have to spend a lot of time on them.
Interminable avec les producteurs.
We often have never-ending discussions with the producers who don't understand why it's so expensive, because model is supposed to be cheap.
Le tournage, à la fin, on passe 3 ou 4 mois à fabriquer quelque chose et le
Because
tournage, en 2 ou 3 ou 4
we
jours.
spend 3 or 4 months making a model, and then the shooting only takes a matter of days, 3 or 4 days.
On a fait pour
I have not shown you
Chien. On a passé plus d'1 an à construire des maquettes pour ce film-là. Même
for one
plus,
film, the Isle of Dogs.
tout dépend
Isle of Dogs film. We spent more than 1 year on it. It all depends on the project,
discussion,
and
parce que nous on fait les miniatures, mais une
that's
fois
what
qu'on a
there's a
fait-
lot of discussion about. So we finish the miniatures, then we shoot them in a studio or outdoors or
il y a tout le
in
travail
a
de
greenhouse.
construction quand même.
But then there's all the post-production work
Ça coûte encore,
nowadays, and that costs quite a lot,
donc c'est
not just in terms of money, but in terms of time as well.
tout ce qui est miniature.
And often it's difficult to sell miniatures these days.
Le réalisateur et la production soient derrière.
So the film director and the producer really have to, producers really have to chase people up.
Bonsoir. Merci beaucoup de nous avoir dévoilé tous
Good
ces
evening.
secrets.
Thank you for revealing all your secrets. It's wonderful. Really makes me dream. It's not just secrets, but treasures. We've seen that there is a museum of miniatures in Lyon, but I think a museum would have to be 10 kilometers long to house all the models you've made in your long career. Answer, well, I myself hardly keep anything. First of all, we don't have the space. Secondly,
tout ce qu'on fait, on a des contrats en béton et tout ce qu'on fait,
we have
différentes productions.
cast iron concrete, cast iron contracts, and everything belongs to the production. The production decide what's going to be done with the models, and some people say to me, but the models could be used for another film. But the film director doesn't like that. The film director usually gets angry because he or she says, no, it belongs to me. I don't want it to be used elsewhere. So I've been working with some people for years to make sure that our miniature decors are kept, nevertheless, and are not thrown into the garbage straight away. Shooting goes off so quickly, and then someone calls and says, well, what are we going to do with such and such a model? The garbage skip is waiting. Should we fill it up? So it's complicated to find places where you can store big sets. The very big sets and decors are usually destroyed. Now, Wes sets a lot of store by our work. He has a large stock of many of the things that we've crafted. He keeps them in a hangar, which he's going to keep for an exhibition which he's going to be doing with the Cinémathèque Française or with another traveling exhibition soon. There are many things that we keep for the Lyon Museum of Miniatures. They've got a storage space. They've done a Wes space where a lot of our models and props are constantly in action. But it's not easy, it's not obvious. It's not obvious to keep things for another film. And people say, no, we don't know where to store them, and then they are thrown into the garbage. We don't just do the work for the miniature or for the model. We do our work so that it is viewed on a cinema screen, and you always have to bear that in mind. We're making these models not for an event or a museum, but for a visual effect, for an image. Of course, I'm pleased when these models are kept and displayed, but you should never forget that the ultimate purpose is for the image. Yes, thank you for your presentation. You said that it's difficult to find people to take over from you if you were to wish to retire. What qualifications do you need for this job? What are the qualifications of the people who are in your team? Answer, well, it's extremely complicated. I receive on average 2 or 3 emails from people every day saying, I would absolutely like to work in or on a Wes Anderson film, but it's not that easy. How should I put it? Most of the people who work with me, the team that surrounds me, well, you have to realize that we are all freelancers, we're all self-employed freelancers, even though I have a small company. virtually nobody is employed because that would not work out financially. There are people whose backgrounds are very different. I have carpenters, I have painters. I have someone who once was a cook, a chef. So I have people who really are excited by their work and especially by working on miniatures. And I also have 2 or 3 people who have studied architecture. But nevertheless, there are people who have done something else in their life. We have to be versatile, multi-skilled. I have 2 model makers who are going crazy because they spend 10 or 12 hours a day working with me, and then they go home and then they start assembling another little model of for Star Wars at home. I have quite a lot of young people who come to me from cinema schools. But I tell them to go and do something else first of all. I tell them to try and get internships in production, film production, because to come and work with us on models, you have to be experienced, you have to have a lot of patience, and you have to realize that we work with IT, with computers, and 3D as well. And even if I have someone who does all the 3D for me, when I give him a piece of wood to cut, he has to know how to do that as well. Was there a question at the back there? Thank you very much indeed for sharing this on-board dream with us. You have an archive, a combined archive. As regards the films that have preceded us, would you, if you had a time machine, would you have if you had a time machine, which films would you have liked to work on? Or can you say which film made you decide to do what you do? Answer: when I was a child, or young at least, there was a film. There was a machine called La Machine à Voyager dans le Temps, time machine. And there they did everything in miniature. When you watch that film today, it seems a little bit ridiculous, oversized lava which goes down narrow streets and so on. But when I was a kid, I was very impressed by that film. Although I was not predestined to work in that world, because my father was a set photographer in cinema, and he told me that I should do something other than cinema by way of a profession. But I did start to get excited about this type of film. There was that film, then there was a film called Le Village des Damnés, and then later, when I was a teenager, aged 15 or 16, of course, there was Star Wars. All of a sudden, you discover an incredible world compared with all the old Star Trek series where everything was made of cardboard. And I thought to myself, why not do this as a profession? But my father told me, no, go and do studies, go and study something. And I must say that I continued, and my father did help me to get a foothold in this business, in this profession. what really helped me to make my dream become true was when I was able to work on the adventures of Baron von Münchhausen, Thierry Guillaume, about 35 years ago, and that opened the doors to this whole world for me. I had that dream, but I'm still always interested in what's happening today. This mixture between the work that we do on models with digital special effects. Some other people of my age say, oh, I'm nostalgic about these old models. I would like everything to be done with old models and miniatures. But I say to that person, no, I'm always interested in new techniques and new technology, and I think that's fabulous. I don't know whether I've answered your question.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. You were speaking a moment ago about the fact that models are not necessarily kept. Sometimes models are destroyed for the purposes of the film. Have you ever crafted models which were intended to be blown up or destroyed? A little boy's question. Answer? Yes, it's happened several times. Houses that catch fire or explode, buildings that explode. But today I have a bit of a scale problem. If you destroy a model today, and if there is smoke or flames or water, it has to be a very big model. You have to work at a scale of 1/4 or 1/3. What I have done several times is for facades of houses or landscapes. We've used a scale of 1/8 or 1/10. But everything that involved flames or fires, this was filmed elsewhere, and then it was combined with the images of our models during post-production, in the post-production stage. But I never regret it when I have to blow up my models, because as I said a moment ago, what counts is what the viewer sees on the screen. In a sense, I'm happy that the model should be destroyed, but in a positive sense. In other words, it has to work in the explosion. We just have a couple of minutes left for a final question.
Wes Anderson est un des noms qui
Wes Anderson is one of the names of the people who are still resisting digitalization and like to use miniatures. How do you see the future of cinema in this regard? Are there other directors who are pushing in this direction? Answer, well, yes, there are other people, one or two films, but I cannot talk about them today. There are other people. They have gone back to these analog techniques, and I have other requests as well. It will remain a niche activity. But 20 years ago, I said to myself, it's finished. I'm never going to be doing miniatures again for cinema. Everything is based on visual effects. That's why I specialized in manufacture of crafting of props. But then with the Grand Budapest Hotel, we're still using them. Even though the last film was Sinashim, we finished shooting that only 1 month ago, and we had to work on another film at the same time, because I could not refuse. Because we had received the request, and a few years earlier I would never have imagined that. And then there's also the advertising industry that often wants to use models, but there has to be the artistic will behind all this, and of course the budget. Well, I live in Germany, and German producers come to see me and ask me to produce dreamlike models for their children's films. But I say, well, yes, but you have to be able to finance it. It costs quite a lot. So they end up using digital techniques after all. Thank you very much indeed for being with us this afternoon, Mr. Weisse.